Hello everybody, this is Connor at BoatsDon'tSink, here with another Shadowverse Evolve deck profile. This isn't the biggest or most anticipated deck coming out of BP08, but it is the one that I wanted to make a video for first, seeing as I just recently won the Tampa regional qualifier with Idolatry Rune. So I'm sure some people out there have, some questions about the deck, want to see my thoughts on it before I jump into the bigger hitters like Puppetry and 2-cost Abyss. Now, I do usually make the whole spiel about these decks are meant to be starting points, they're not fully optimized for metas, so test them out, make changes. I can't quite say that for this one. This is, in my opinion, fairly optimized, but metas are still different, and that is especially an important factor for control decks such as this, where some of your toolbox options may not be important in some metas, and they may be very critical in others. So, of course, please do test this out yourself, make any changes that you find necessary, especially as the BP08 meta continues to develop as we get further into it. Now, taking a look at the deck list, this is a lot more unique cards than I normally have in these deck profiles. We have 19 unique cards here. That's mainly because of the Merlin toolbox, a lot of 1 of 3-cost spells. Otherwise, the deck is pretty much built out on 3 ofs for consistency for all of our important pieces. The deck is pretty streamlined to just do the same thing every game, which of course is what you want your deck to always do. But a deck like this, especially where we have a very important inevitability win condition that takes setup, we want to be able to get it as often as possible on the earliest turn possible. So that's basically what the deck is built to do. It is a lot of spells. It's 24 spells, 16 followers, which we'll take a look at, and a lot of just control pieces, since we want to take control of the game. Our Evolve deck is about as simple as it can get. We're just maxed out on the 4 followers in our deck that do evolve. I had played around with some other evolves like Meisha, but I don't think they're quite important in this deck. So just max out on everything and you're good to go. You can of course check out the deck log page for this deck using the link in the description or the code in the bottom right. That is 2FNGJ. Looking at a breakdown, as I said, we are on 16 followers, 24 spells. The spells do most of the heavy lifting, but the followers are important as well. They're all either setup or board control or just consistency. We are playing 0-cost cards in this deck, 3 of them, the new Joy of Destruction. And then almost no 1-costs, we only have 2 1-costs. So we are actually playing pretty early, or pretty light in the early game. We're passing on turn 1 fairly frequently. But this does mean that we basically just get to draw extra cards and sit on them, and have just more card advantage available to us once we can start 2-for-1ing our opponent, since we weren't spending cards on 1-for-1s earlier. 2s and 3s make up the heaviest parts of our curve at 12 each, and that's because we want to see lots of things that we can play to sort of stop our opponents early in the aggro range. And we also want just cards that we can multicast and weave together in whatever way we need to be able to answer threats. 7 4-costs is a bit heavier than I normally like, but they are all important cards to our deck. 3 of them, of course, are Lishenna herself, and the other 4 are basically just 3-for-1 removal pieces, which are very good to curve Lishenna into. Anything higher than that is pretty much just board wipes, so that's that. Looking at the specific cards we got, starting off we have 3 copies of Joy of Destruction. This is the new spell to support Lishenna. It is one of the most important cards we got in the deck. I'm not sure if it's the most important card, but it definitely is very important. Lishenna's biggest issue is that she was slow to set up, since you would have to play her for 4, and then you would still have 3 play points of amulets that you would have to get onto the field while dealing with whatever your opponent was doing. Joy of Destruction solves that somewhat. It says if there's an Idolatry card on your field, recover 1 play point. If there's a Lishenna on your field, draw a card. So, of course, Lishenna meets both of those requirements. The ideal time that we'll be playing this is on turn 4, in addition to our Lishenna, to get a play point back and draw a card, replacing the Joy of Destruction. That one play point lets us start pushing up our amulets earlier, and it can really speed up the game for us. We play 3 because we don't always have time to search it before turn 4, so we want to be able to just raw draw it as often as possible. Moving into our only 1 cost spell, we play 2 copies of Destructive Refrain. This spell has 2 modes. You can choose option 1, which is to search your deck for a Lishenna Omen of Destruction, add it to hand, and shuffle. Or you can choose option 2, which is to pay 2, making it a 3-cost spell, to deal X damage to each enemy follower on the field. X is the number of Idolatry cards on your field. This is pretty good at just answering like X2s. Decks that are trying to go wide with a lot of smaller guys can kind of get blown out by this for 3 play points once your setup is in play. It does need you to have like the amulets or something in play before this becomes a viable option, but it means that the card is not entirely dead once we already have our setup, since we're clearly not going to be searching Lishenna at that point. Looking at our 2-drops, the only follower we play at 2 is Agnes Tachyon, of course, the Runecraft All-Star. 2-cost 2/2. Whenever you play a spell, select an enemy follower on the field and give it -1/-1. That text is super relevant this format, since puppets are everywhere, and they are 1/1 tokens. It means casting any spell lets us kill an extra puppet, and it makes Fire Chain especially potent, since we can now take out 3 targets sometimes with a single Fire Chain. It is also worth noting that it can get our Fire Chain to 4 damage against 1 single target if we want to put it all in the same place, which can be relevant against 4/4s, which there are a number of that we'll look at when we get to Surefire Bullet. But notably, on curve, it means we can answer Rune at end step, since the Fire Chain will be boosted to 3 play points by Rune's effect. Playing Agnes on 2 and then Fire Chain on 3 still gives us a way to clear the Rune and open up the way for Lishenna. Agnes Tachyon can evolve for 1 play point into a 3/3. On evolve, select a spell in your cemetery and add it to your hand, and it continues to have the -1/-1 effect. The spells that we're adding back to our hand from cemetery are typically either going to be Monochromatic Destruction, which is our main win condition accelerating spell, or it's going to be a like heavy removal piece that we're not able to flash back off of Merlin, since this is our only going to be our only way to recur those. We play 3 copies of Fire Chain. This is from the original starter deck. It hasn't seen much play in recent sets, especially since it got replaced by Splendid Conjury in a lot of the Kuon decks. But it is quite good for us here. We get to deal 3 damage divided between up to 2 enemy followers. This is, once again, very good for clearing small things like puppets. It's good for answering X2s and X3s. And it is especially good against the Disdain decks, since in the early game, they'll be dealing a lot of damage to their own followers as they play things like Zealot of Disdain to set up, leaving a lot of followers at 1 and 2 defense, even if they initially had more, and it allows us to 2-for-1 them quite easily. This is one of the more important cards early, just to keep aggro decks off of our back, since we really do need to have a safe board state to play Lishenna into. We play 3 copies of Monochromatic Destruction. This is the most important spell in relation to just executing our win condition, since we do need to get our opponent dead at some point. Monochromatic Destruction is quick timing, deal 2 damage to an enemy follower, and then if we have at least 2 Idolatry cards on the field, we can deal 2 damage to its leader, and give our leader +2 defense. So it deals 2 and heals 2, as long as we have 2 Idolatry, which will of course be our 2 amulets, Destruction in white and Destruction in black. This is great for just doing math to set up lethal turns on our opponent. Very often they'll think that they are outside of range of dying, and you hit them with Monochromatic Destruction into like Agnes Evo, recast it, or Merlin Evo, recast it, and just get 4 damage on them out of nowhere while removing their follower, and you heal 4. So it creates very large life swings that are hard for a lot of decks to overcome, and it's part of the reason this deck is so difficult to beat once it gets set up. Lastly, we play 3 copies of Surefire Bullet. This continues to be one of the most important removal spells in the game. For 2 cost, quick timing, deal 3 damage to an enemy follower, and more importantly, if it's evolved, we deal 4 damage instead. Evo 4/4s have been everywhere since the beginning of time, and they are still everywhere now, and a lot of them are very powerful. You have, of course, in the Puppetry deck, Orcus Vengeful Puppet. That's the 7 cost Orcus, is a 4/4, and if they start to swing puppets at you to try to crash them into things like Lishenna or Medusa, being able to remove the Orcus from board so that they don't have the burn effect any longer is your highest priority. Surefire Bullet allows us to do that with a single card. The Thief decks, of course, also run Octress, which is a 4/4 Evo, and the Abyss decks, 2 cost and otherwise, are pretty much all running Rune, which, while he can rip cards out of your hand and he does make your Surefire Bullet cost more, you can still answer him on curve at instep with a Surefire Bullet. If you pass on 3 and let your opponent play Rune, you can just use those 3 play points to answer it immediately. Rune is one of the bigger threats to this deck, since the spell tax makes Joy of Destruction cost 1 play point and disables us from playing it on the same turn as Lishenna. So it is important to make sure we can answer him on end step. Moving into our 3 costs, we have 3 copies of Merlin. Again, just a staple Runecraft follower. It's always been in the decks, always will be in the decks. Fanfare, search your deck for a spell, reveal it, add it to your hand. That is about as powerful as you can get on a Runecraft card. The spells we are typically going to be searching for in the early game are either Joy of Destruction or Destructive Refrain. Convenient thing is that Merlin always comes down the turn before Lishenna, which means we can search Joy of Destruction on 3 and then play it on 4 alongside Lishenna if we already have her. If we don't already have her, it's unfortunate because we won't be able to get her before like the time to play her on curve, but we can search Destructive Refrain and then spend our turn 4 searching her and playing like a removal spell or something, or evolving the Merlin if it manages to live. And then on turn 5, we'll have enough play points to both play Lishenna and push up Destruction in white immediately. The other nice thing to note is that Merlin, if you go second, you can search Joy of Destruction, and if Merlin lives, when you play Joy of Destruction on 4, you can actually go ahead and pay 1 and an Evo point to evolve Merlin and recast Joy of Destruction, and you'll just get that 1 play point back again. So it's effectively a free +1/+1 and draw an extra card tied to your Merlin if you do go second, which is generally not great for the deck, but it will happen sometimes. Merlin can also pay 2 to evolve. Evo Merlin can select a spell that costs 3 play points or less in Cemetery and play it for 0. This is why we play a very wide suite of 3 cost spells that all are essentially the same thing but with different varying upsides that can matter in different scenarios. These are the cards you'll be searching late game, oftentimes to play Merlin, search them, cast them, evolve, cast them a second time, or you'll just be searching big board wipe spells. But these are, of course, we can evolve and cast Monochromatic Destruction, because it's the Drain 2 and Deal 2. It's the smallest in terms of removal, but has very big impact otherwise. Craving Splendor is 4 damage that heals us. Purgation's Blade destroys any follower. Truth's Adjudication is kind of a finisher more than anything, since it allows us to deal 3 damage straight to our opponent, which can be 6 if we cast it from hand and then once again from Merlin, and Witch Bolt to deal 5 and draw a card. So it's all removal, but different flavors of removal and different upsides that can just be situational. We get to pick whichever one's best for us. Play 3 copies of Zealot of Destruction. This is a new follower from BP08. Not critical to the game plan, but definitely a very welcome card. 3 cost 3/4 is good stat line, a little hard to remove. Fanfare, if there are at least 3 Idolatry cards on field, select an enemy follower on field, destroy it, deal 2 damage to its leader, and give your leader +2 defense. So this is kind of Monochromatic Destruction on a beat stick. Obviously not quick timing, but it is tied to a 3/4. And if we have the 2 amulets, Zealot will always be the 3rd Idolatry card and trigger his own effect for free. Destroying an enemy follower is crazy. 3 cost 3/4 is already just a nice stat line. The fact that we get to destroy any follower, not just like a cost 3 or lower, cost 4 or lower, or deal 4 damage. We can take out Rose Queens with this. We can take out Altar Plane Arbiters with this. We can take out a Genesis Dragon with this if we have to. And we still get to deal 2 and heal 2, which progresses our win condition even further. So this guy is great. We play 1 copy of Center Street. This is a 3 cost quick timing, deal 5 damage. We get to draw a card if there's a Passion follower on our field, but spoiler alert, we do not play any Passion followers. This is just here because it is the only way to deal 5 damage at quick timing, and 5 is a somewhat relevant number for the Forest matchup. 5 is enough to take out an Anastasia or Lloyd on the combo turn, where they hit combo 5 and give +1/+1 to the board, since it'll make both of them 3/5s. It is also enough to take out a Storm Sukuna at combo 5 on a non-Anastasia turn. That's not as common, but some of the scenarios where, say, you play Lishenna and push up an amulet on 4, on 5, if you're going first, you can just push up the second amulet and pass, and you'll still have 3 play points up. This allows you to answer one of their big followers on their end step, making it significantly easier for you to clear the rest of the board on your 6 play point turn. This is probably the most cuttable out of all of our spell toolbox. So if you don't think that those kinds of plays are super important to you, some of the other options you can look at are Concentration, which is heal 3, draw a card. I am not particularly a huge fan of Concentration just because it does not affect the board. It is a bit slow. I don't think you have the time to be trying to grind out the game like that. I think you'd rather have straight removal, but it is an option I've seen. Otherwise, we have Fall from Grace, which is quick timing, banish an enemy, or banish a follower on the field. Generally, that will be an enemy follower, but there are some use cases where you would want to banish your own. You give that follower's leader +2 defense, and their controller draws a card. So this does have some downside if you use it as removal, since it is pushing you a little further away from your win condition. But if you're banishing something very big or important that's hard to remove otherwise, then it's worth it. And since it's banish, they don't get last words effects for when that is relevant. Or you could play Slash of the One. This is another 3 cost spell that destroys. It only destroys cost 4 or less, but it destroys a card, not just a follower. This could make it relevant for the mirror. If following, current results, players tend to start playing more Lishenna. If you're afraid of playing mirror matches, you could run this as a Merlin recastable way to destroy your opponent's Destruction in white and Destruction in black. Primarily Destruction in white is the one you care about destroying so that you can get your opponent to 0 defense. You'll be out healing their Destruction in black anyway. But that could be a mirror breaker option if you think you'll be playing a lot of mirrors. It is notably worse at killing enemy followers, though, since a lot of the big things we want to deal with do cost 5. Maybe not a lot, but at least a handful of them cost 5. Our next spell is Craving's Splendor. We play 2 copies of it, though if you don't value this effect highly, you could cut 1 copy to just bump up a second copy of anything else. I probably would not cut the second copy for one of the flex spells. I think Center Street is probably still the better cut for that. This is 3 cost quick timing. Costs 3 less to play from EX if we have Gilnelise, but we don't, so ignore that. You deal 4 damage to an enemy follower and give your leader +1 defense. Anytime that 4 damage is enough to answer something and you don't need the 5th damage, this can be an option to heal a little bit. Sometimes that 1 heal will matter more than you think, so it is nice to just get a little bit of extra life any chance you have. 1 copy of Purgation's Blade. This is another spell where it references specific cards that we don't play. Select an enemy follower on the field, destroy it, and give each Meisha hero of Purgation on your field +1 attack for every follower in your cemetery. We don't play Meisha, so this is essentially just 3-cost destroy an enemy follower. It seems maybe a little underwhelming since we don't play Meisha, but I assure you it's a very powerful effect. Destroying any follower means we don't have to worry about big things like Noah, or big things like Altar Plane Arbiter, Crimson Rose Queen. Cards that aren't storming us, but that we do need to get off the board before our opponent's next turn. We have a Merlin tutorable way to do so, since Zealot obviously is not tutorable. And we have, more importantly, a Merlin recastable way to do so. I've even had games where my turn 8 play might be Merlin Search Purgation's Blade, cast it, pay 2 Evo, cast it again to clear 2 giant things off the board. You can just do this with Full Bloom Panorama, but generally, you want to save Full Bloom Panorama for quick, important quick timing moments. And of course, sometimes when you clear stuff, you might not be doing it all in one turn. You might play the Merlin, Search Purgation's Blade, clear 1 target as a 6 play point play, and then what is that? A turn or 2 later, your opponent plays another big thing that you need it for. You can just Evo a Merlin and pop it. So, good card, very flexible. This is another one that I guess you could cut, but I probably wouldn't recommend it. 1 copy of Truth's Adjudication, the replacement to Ye Olde Demonic Strike. This has a lot of options, but we're very rarely choosing any of them except for face damage. We do get to choose 2 options instead of 1 if we have 2 mage followers on field. But unfortunately, Merlin is our only mage, meaning that we would have to stick 2 Merlins. I'm sorry, Merlin and Sweet Tooth Medusa is a mage in the deck, but we would have to stick 2 of those on board for that to matter, and that's not super likely. Could happen, but not super likely. Your options are draw 2 cards, deal 3 to the enemy leader, or deal 3 to an enemy follower. Ideally, you don't want to be using this as 3 damage follower removal, since you have way more efficient ways to do that. This is mostly here as a 3 damage to the face that you can recast off Merlin, giving you 6 damage reach to close out games when the opportunity arises. 1 copy of Witch Bolt, 3 cost, deal 5 to an enemy follower, and if you have an evolved follower, draw a card. We have a handful of followers that evolve, and all of them actually synergize quite well with this card. Agnes Tachyon's evolve can add it from our cemetery back to hand, Merlin can recast it from cemetery, and Sweet Tooth Medusa can reduce its cost down to 1, making it very easy to play alongside any of them and get that extra card draw. Even if you're not drawing a card, sometimes you just need the 5 damage, so still a playable card regardless. Moving out of our 3 drops into the higher end of our curve, we start with Curse Crafter, 4 cost 2/2. We only play 1 because he got restricted to 1. And funnily enough, he's not the most powerful card in this deck. We just play him because we can. Fanfare, he makes a Paper Shikigami token that is a 2 cost 2/2 last words draw discard. Activated ability, we can sack a Shikigami follower, which will always just be the Paper Shikigami, to deal 4 to an enemy follower. He evolves for 1 into a 3/3. On evolve, we can deal 2 damage to an enemy follower. If there are at least 7 spells and Onmyoji cards in Cemetery, deal 4 instead. Getting to the 4 is not nearly as easily as it is in all the D-Shift Kuon decks, since we don't have any other Onmyoji cards, and we are playing a handful of followers that aren't spells. But in the late game, you will hit that 7 point. It's not super high. It's still less than a third of our total spells. So you will get the 4 late. Curse Crafter is basically just the 4th copy of Sweet Tooth Medusa that is way worse than Sweet Tooth Medusa. It can answer up to 3 different followers. It frequently will answer 2 by maybe dealing 4 to one thing and then dealing 2 to another and then swinging at that second one to finish it off. Anything like that. So he's just some more removal that, since he's on 4+1, he is very easy to play the turn after you play Lishenna if your opponent took that opportunity to set up a board and you need to answer a few things. Lishenna herself, the big sort of boss monster of the deck, though she doesn't do most of the work involved in winning. 4 cost 2/4 Fanfare, put a Destruction in white and Destruction in black token into your EX area. That does not sound like a lot, however, these cards are how we're winning the game. Destruction in white is a 1-cost amulet. At start of main phase, give your leader +2 defense. Destruction in black is a 2-cost amulet. Start of main phase, deal 2 to each enemy leader. That means every main phase, we are widening the gap by 4. That ends games quicker than you would expect, especially when combined with things like Monochromatic Destruction and Zealot of Destruction. Ideally, what we're trying to do here is play Lishenna on turn 4. Previously, you would have to play her and pass. Now that we have Joy of Destruction, we can play her, play Joy, get a play point back, draw a card, and then push Destruction and white up immediately. Since we're not answering the board on turn 4, anything our opponent already had will get to swing at us for free. Getting the Healing Amulet into play immediately allows us to start healing some of that back off and work to stabilize quicker than the deck was able to previously. That is one of the big reasons this deck is viable now when it was not great beforehand, especially in the face of aggro decks. Our last 4-cost follower is what I would consider probably the most powerful card in the deck, maybe the most powerful card in Rune, probably even one of the most powerful cards in the game right now, Sweet Tooth Medusa. It's a 4-cost 3/4 Fanfare. Search your deck for a card that costs 2 or less, reveal it, add it to hand, and shuffle. If we play this on the turn after Lishenna and our Lishenna survived, which is not uncommon, Lishenna is a 2/4 and she will not be engaged, so it is not uncommon that she survives. We can search Joy of Destruction. That allows us to recover another play point and draw another card. The big thing here is that if we went first, which is what this deck wants to do, Medusa cannot evolve on turn 5, which is the turn after Lishenna. However, if we play Joy of Destruction, we can go back up to 2 play points after playing Medusa. Since we're at 5, we go down to 1. Search Joy, play it, go back up to 2, and then we can use that 2 to evolve Sweet Tooth Medusa. That is very important for getting set up fully as fast as possible. And going second, while it's not necessary for her to help her evolve, it does allow us to play slightly more powerful things in addition to her. If we've already set up and we're playing Sweet Tooth Medusas later, or just in the scenarios where we don't have a Lishenna on field for Joy of Destruction, we can either search Monochromatic Destruction, especially if we've not yet seen one, because we would like to get one into our Cemetery cycle for Agnes Tachyon, or we can just straight up search Agnes Tachyon, because for some reason, Sweet Tooth Medusa says card and not spell like the rest of our deck. So she can search followers, amulets, whatever else you may need, and Agnes Tachyon is a perfect target for that. Sweet Tooth Medusa, as I said, evolves for 2 play points. She evolves into a 4/5. Very reasonable stat line. On evolve, select up to 2 enemy followers on the field and deal 5 damage divided between them. It's like Fire Chain ++. Very easy to answer 2 followers with this. Or, worst case scenario, answer 1 follower and set up another one for Medusa to just swing into to remove. Whenever we do destroy an enemy follower, using these effects or whatever else we have, we make a Serpent token, which is a 1-cost 0/1 Bane from Abysscraft. The 0/1 Bane, it comes up every now and then, but generally these aren't going to be lasting on our board, so we aren't going to be swinging with them. Instead, we have a quick timing activated ability to bury 2 serpents. The next card we play this turn costs 2 less. Things that cost 2 are notably Destruction in black. So ideally what we're going to be doing here is the turn 4, play Lishenna, play Joy, push up Destruction in white. Turn 5, play Medusa, search another Joy, play it, pay 2, Evo Medusa, deal 5 damage to destroy 2 things, or destroy 1 and swing into a second one. Sack 2 serpents, push up Destruction in black for 0. Sometimes, if the board states are set up right, You can actually like evolve Medusa, destroy 2 things, get 2 serpents, sack the 2 serpents, play Monochromatic Destruction or Surefire Bullet or whatever. You kill something else, get a snake, swing Medusa into something, get another one, and then sack 2 to push up Destruction in black. So you can actually have some very powerful turns where you get like, what, 6, 7, 8, like 10 play points worth of stuff out on turn 5. Just depending on how you sequence things. So Medusa lines are very powerful. But even if you don't do the very convoluted, complex chains with it, just getting Destruction in black out for 0 is another way that we can speed this deck up. As I said, taking a lot of time off to play Lishenna and then push up the amulets was the weakness before. Medusa gives us a way to clear the opponent's board while we continue to set up, and that's really, really what this deck needed. Later in the game, once you're already set up, of course, you can use that 2-cost reduction to play things like Monochromatic Destruction, or just use it to reduce the cost of higher costed things like Zealot of Destruction and be able to play him for 1 play point. It is worth noting, this ability is also quick timing, so you can bury 2 serpents on your opponent's turn. I would never really rely on that though, because your opponent can just remove the serpents. There's 0 ones. They can just remove them before they start doing things. So try to do all of your bury effects on your own turn. Sometimes you'll end up with 1 serpent left over, which you can't sack because you don't have 2. That serpent is the one that will be swinging into your opponent's giant dudes, if it's ever given the chance to. And that can be a threat to your opponent, right? Like, oh, don't turn your Anastasia sideways because I can just kill it with a snake, right, that I got for free. Moving into the top end of our spells, at 5, we have Alchemical Lore. This is a 1-of, deal 4 damage to each enemy follower on the field. Unfortunately, 4 is not a fantastic number for a card like this. As we mentioned earlier, the forest boards with Anastasia and Lloyd end up at 5 defense, so Alchemical Lore can't quite clear them without, like, Agnes Tachyon or some other additional spell. However, it is the cheapest, like, board clear option we have that does a reasonable amount of damage, since Destructive Refrain will frequently only deal 2. Alchemical Lore can deal 4 for 5 play points, and sometimes that's just enough. Sometimes, even if you can't clear everything with it, clearing like 3 guys off the board for 1 card can be good enough for us, and that's what it's here for. The next spell we have is Full Bloom Panorama. This is from the Idolmaster Cinderella Girls set. 5 cost, quick timing, select up to 2 enemy followers on the field and destroy them. This card being quick timing is massive. It can just be used on your turn to just destroy 2 things that are kind of big or whatever, but one of the weaknesses of this deck is getting chunked for massive amounts of damage just all at once, especially if we're still at a point where we're trying to stabilize somewhat, or our opponent's been able to hit us pretty hard and is just trying to go for the finish. We can use this to, for 5 play points, answer an Azidahaka, which would have 8 defense. We could answer King Elephants that have as much as like 17 or 19 defense. We can answer Mistalina against Nature a Sword, which is going to have 6 defense or more. So it just makes it very safe for us in the late game. And especially a lot of times in the late game, we'll be in a position where we're just drawing for turn, maybe playing 1 card to answer a thing on board, and then passing with all of our play points up, playing something on the end of our opponent's turn, or when our opponent attacks, to answer their followers, and sort of keep them in a like locked out of the game position. And Full Bloom Panorama is just one of the most powerful cards we can hold up in those positions. It lets us answer anything unconditionally almost. The last card we have is Crimson Meteor Storm. 7 cost, deal 6 to each enemy follower on the field, deal 3 damage to each enemy leader. At spell chain 10, this only costs 5, but that's part of the reason we play Alchemical Lore. This deck in particular is never going to be at spell chain 10 early enough to play this on curve for 5 play points. You're not getting the 5 cost Meteor Storm probably until like turn 8, 9, 10 at the earliest. That being said, 6 damage is very good for us, so even playing this for the full 7 later in the game can be great, and the 3 damage to the enemy leader can help speed up our clock by an additional turn and a half compared to just Destruction in black. We can also add this back off of like Agnes Tachyon, just to hold in hand to keep board wiping or keep pushing damage. This slot was there was a consideration between playing the second Crimson Meteor Storm or the second Full Bloom Panorama. That's another thing that you should just play around with and see which one you're more comfortable on. I like the second Full Bloom Panorama because I did not quite as often find that I needed a clear for more than 2 large things at once. And if I did, things like Destructive Refrain or Fire Chain with an Agnes Tachyon could answer like more than 2 small things. So I chose the Full Bloom Panorama, but you might find that different. You might find that you frequently need Crimson Meteor Storm to answer like puppetry boards over and over again into the late game. So mess around with that and test it out. Taking a look at the deck as a whole, pros of the deck. The win condition is an inevitable clock. Your opponent can't really interact with it. Very few decks play Amulet removal, almost none unless they're running like Execution for some reason. Abyss decks don't play Machikane Tannhauser. Bahamut does not see play right now, so like there's very, very little that would be threatening your amulets, which allows you to just fully focus on controlling the board, and as long as you stay alive with your control pieces, your opponent will die eventually. We also have tons of tutors and recursion for consistency. Agnes Tachyon, Merlin, Destructive Refrain, Medusa. These things all just let us get whatever pieces we need out of our deck or out of our cemetery at any time, so we always have the right answers for the right problems. And in that vein, we are able to play a toolbox of a lot of different answers, all one-ofs, to sort of take advantage of all this tutoring, so that we have access, or so that we even have those right answers in our deck to begin with. Some cons of the deck, however, setting up the win condition can be a bit slow, especially if you don't draw Joy of Destruction and Medusa to help you accelerate it, which can leave the deck open to aggro strategies. Any deck that can pressure us as we're trying to set up Lishenna could potentially just kill us before we can stabilize, and that is what leads to our bad matchups. The main decks you have to watch out for this for against are Puppetry and Thief Sword. Our other issue is that high stat followers with Aura can be nearly impossible to answer. This isn't really a problem in the format right now, but as things develop, if Sword decks start to play more copies of like Armor of the Stars, where now all of a sudden you have to play like Crimson Meteor Storm to be able to answer their 5/6 Octress Evo, because like not even your Medusa can crash into it, the matchups could start getting very sketchy very fast. Cards like Heavenly Aegis are basically impossible for the deck to ever kill. Hopefully in a matchup like that, you're already winning the game just off of burn damage by the time you get there, but it is something to keep in mind that as the meta develops, the format could just become too hostile towards this deck and put it in a position where it's just not quite worth playing, despite how powerful I think it is. Once again, the entire deck as a whole, you can check out the deck log page using the code in the bottom right, 2FNGJ. That link will also be in the description. Thanks for watching. This has been a bit of a longer one, but this was a deck that I played pretty extensively going into last weekend for the Tampa Regional. It's a deck I very much enjoyed playing. It's a deck that I think fits the playstyle that I want to be going for in, other games like Magic the Gathering. I was always a blue-white Esper, like draw pass control player, and Lishenna really lets you live that out in Shadowverse. So again, thank you. I'll have some more deck profiles coming out soon. In the meantime, you can check out any of the videos on the screen now to see some other content. I'll see you next time.